A very good afternoon to you all from wherever you're watching us from. Good morning, depending on where you're from, and good evening for some of us. Welcome to An Hour with Treasury. We look at different issues, we have updates, we have insights that we share once a month for about 60 or so minutes, broadcasting from Bulawayo and also various places across the globe. We've got a great episode today and special guests who I'm going to be introducing to you shortly, just to recognize that the times require us to be alert, to be diligent, and we hope you're keeping safe wherever you are. Our topic of discussion today is generational wealth transfer. Generational wealth transfer. It's a broad topic. We will attempt to see how much we can pack in just an hour, in just 60 minutes. And allow me to just recognize that at the office where I work, I have a colleague of mine who is not on the platform, but who I would do well to put on the screen. That's Yvonne Bebe. She's a graduate of Midland State University. She's our paralegal intern. And some of the things that we're going to discuss this afternoon, if you feel you need further information, if you need more time to discuss and you have further questions that may arise from this discussion, please feel free to reach out to Yvonne, and she will be very happy to get in touch with you, to call you back, to email you back, and to attend to some of the topics that will arise from today's discussion. And we're also keen to know where people are viewing us from. In the comments section, feel free to just let us know where you're viewing us from, and periodically we'll just check on the comments and see. It's always nice to know that this is much broader than just the discussants on the program at this moment in time. So without further ado, allow me to introduce our guests today. The first guest that I'm going to introduce is a very good colleague of mine, elder of mine. I've known him for longer than I can count. This is Elder Promise Ncube. He's a senior partner at Coughlin & Welsh, a legal practitioner, but he also chairs a committee where I'm a secretary, and that's the Planned Giving and Trust Services Steering Committee at Zook. That's a mouthful. We'll ask him later on to tell us more about that. And the next person that I just want to add onto the screen is someone I've come to appreciate and use as a great wealth of resource in this area, in the topic of generational wealth transfer. In fact, the term generational wealth transfer, the first presentation I ever saw was one that he was presenting. So it's appropriate that he's on this forum. He's with the Northern Conference Development Trust, and he's the director there. He will maybe tell us a little more about what that entails, but he has great depth and has worked in the area of generational wealth transfer as well in his previous responsibilities. And the last but not least, the last facilitator or panelist is none other than Pastor Howard Rousseau. We call him Uncle Howie, we call him Pastor Howie, depending on who you are. He's been linked to our family for the longest time, and he is a fun person to be with, always with great wit, great wisdom, great attitude, and great advice at the best of times. So we're so happy to be here. He's also a former stewardship director of the Northern Conference, so he will bring certain insights, particularly from the area of stewardship, from the angle of being a pastor and someone who is well versed with how people operate. and think about the topic at hand. So with that, I think I want to start with Elder Hanno. This is a broad topic, and maybe someone is already asking, why generational wealth transfer? Why are we having this conversation? What's important about it? Why is it significant? Why dedicate 60 minutes of our precious time to discuss this? Can you just kind of frame the topic for us as we take off?
Well, thank you, Elder Masuku. It's a big privilege to be here on this esteemed panel of colleagues and friends. What we are going to discuss today, as this episode develops, we'll see how important, how critical it is to Christians, and especially to Seventh-day Adventists. In 1 Corinthians 14, verse 33, we learn that God is not a God of confusion, but a God of order. And we'll see why this is so important in intergenerational wealth transfer. If we are mindful to the fact that all the wealth in the world changes hands every generation, it is an amazing thought. And once you understand this, we understand that the wealth in the hands of Christians and Seventh-day Adventists change hands also every generation. In 1860, already, Sister Ellen White, in Spiritual Gifts, Volume 2, wrote about the importance of donations and of having a will. And if you think carefully, the early church was funded by members who either gave immediately or by deferred giving. So it is very important that we as Christians and Adventists be mindful of the counsel of Sister White. In 1961, Trust Services at the Spring Council was recognized as a department, as a functioning ministry. And in 1995, it was recognized by the General Conference as a separate department, as important as stewardship and children's ministry and personal ministries. And in 2006, the name Trust Services was changed to Planned Giving and Trust Services. So planned giving is at the essence of what we are discussing today. We can either serve God with the possession in our care or not. The choice is ours. We must please remember that everything we own belongs to God, and He chose us as servants to entrust certain assets into our care, and He would like to see us use the assets in serving Him through stewardship. So this is why it is important. Whatever we give to the Lord is forever stored in His great warehouse in heaven. That is the only assets that we will keep when we die, is that which we have given to God. All other assets, I will get to certain exceptions, is really squandered if we don't use it in the service of God. So that is why this is so important to us as Christians.
Fantastic. Thanks for framing that for us. So it's essentially at the core of our relationship with God, from what I gather.
Yes.
He gives, we receive, but then what we do with that is effectively, it signifies the relationship in this life, and my assumption is even after we die. I think that's the kind of domain that I believe we'll be discussing today. So with that, maybe let me just jump over to my elder, Promise Nube. I did say you are the chairperson of the ZUK, Planned Giving and Trust Services Steering Committee. Elder Hanno has kind of given us an idea of Planned Giving and Trust Services. But you're also a senior partner at Coglan & Welsh. And maybe someone is looking at this whole setup and asking, what does this have to do with generational wealth transfer? Can you kind of connect the dots for us, please?
Yes. Thank you, my elder. Firstly, it is my honor and privilege to be in this panel and to be part of the esteemed guests that are my fellow panelists. So thank you for that, for this privilege, my elder. As senior partner of Coglan & Welsh, I've got two roles. One is administrative and one is a substantive role. On the administrative role, I provide leadership to all the lawyers in the firm and the staff complement in the firm. I provide them with vision, and I'm the one responsible for the strategic planning of the firm. And on the substantive level, I'm the head of the commercial division of Coglan & Welsh, and also the estate planning division of Coglan & Welsh, which is really about generational wealth transfer. On the other hand, to appreciate my role as the Planned Giving and Trust Services Chair, I'll be saying PGTS. So when I say PGTS, I mean Planned Giving and Trust Services. To appreciate my role, one is to understand the focus of PGTS, and its focus is on the faithful stewardship of the material possessions that God has placed in our hands, which we can transfer whilst we're alive, and which we can plan to transfer on our death to our beneficiaries, such as our family, to God's work, and even to the needy. What that means, it means that my role as chair is that I'm chairing a committee that seeks to encourage church members to appreciate that they are God's stewards in respect of the property that has been entrusted to them. I chair a committee that seeks to encourage them to understand that during their lifetime, they should use that property wisely, and also they should plan for how that property will be distributed when they die, without forgetting the cause of God, and also without forgetting that of the needy. So in a nutshell, the relevance of all this to the generational wealth transfer is that I can talk from an informed basis. I can talk knowledgeably on the laws regarding generational wealth transfer. But but apart from that technical know-how, and because I'm the PGTS chair, the relevance is that I can go beyond the technical know-how, technical side of wealth transfer, and recognize that as Christians, we are accountable to the Lord for the use of our property. So in one sentence, Elder, I can say my PGTS role adds a spiritual dimension to my legal expertise as a lawyer.
Actually, you've nailed it. And let me just appreciate, first of all, the support that you've given this ministry. I call it a ministry. When you begin to appreciate what it means for people's lives, I call it a ministry, because of the very thing that you've just stated, where the technical with the appreciation of our obligations as Christians. And I think as the afternoon goes on, we will see the value of that. So thank you so much for giving us that insight. And I'll interchange. I'll call you Uncle Howie. I'll call you Pastor Howie. And you've been a stewardship director in the past. You're a pastor of, which I should have mentioned earlier, of the Midrand district of the Northern Conference in South Africa. And anyone who knows about that demographic is that it's very broad. You've got your wealthy people and your not so wealthy people all in that area. our interest is to maybe, can you tell us what you've found? Why is it so difficult for people to plan, to be deliberate about generational wealth transfer? What have you found? I mean, from your experience as a pastor, as a director, why is it so difficult?
Thank you for the invitation, Inda, and also for the question. And good to meet the other panelists. Elder Promise, I'm meeting for the first time. Hanno Becker and myself, we've been colleagues for a good number of years. To the lady in Malawi, Molowanje, Sikoma Kwambili, that's the sum total of my Chichewa. So welcome and thank you so much for being here. Yeah, now, thinking about it now, there are three parts to the answer, three parts to that question. The one is culture, the second one is religion, and the third one will be the socio-economic. Now, looking at the first one, culture, and this goes across the country and countries. Now, various cultures see and or believe that you do not discuss your death. Much less plan for your death, more so financially. You know what I mean? And this is quite a funny little comment here. If it is suggested that a parent draws up a will, the response would be, "Are you wanting me dead?" And that kills, and the pun, not intended, that kills the conversation. "Are you wanting me dead?" When you're speaking about drawing up a will. So because of the brevity of time, I'll just keep it brief. Number two, religion. Now, religion, the concept that God will provide. And if you do want to make provision for the future, you lack faith. You lack faith. And then also there's this concept that you will more likely, Jesus will more likely return before you die. So you just have faith and he will sort it out. Now, it's also a common concept or reason used not to make provision for beyond this lifetime. And in our circles particularly, and Hanno mentioned at the beginning, more so as Seventh Adventists, the misconception that EGW writes that we must not buy insurance policies. And yet, when you unpack it, as I had to do, there are pages where she speaks on the benefits of preparing for the rainy day, which includes life beyond, after, and those who remain behind. Now, so there's your cultural, there's your religious, and there are many more. And then there's your social economic. Now, when you're living on or just below the bread line, like most people of color have in our past history, and very unfortunately still do, you have little to no money available to plan for retirement, for life, for those after your death. Now, the truth be told, many of us, we eke out a living most of our lives. Now, I would gonna guess that the population where there is and always has been a very high income, preparations are in place financially for beyond, and this generational wealth transfer is in place. Now, my sister's head of department at one of our universities in our province, she has a financial portfolio second to none, right? Given her by her parents. She's got trust funds, investments, share portfolios, etc. This is all there. Now, most of our population living on the other side of the railway line has never and will probably never know what a share portfolio is to start with, let alone have one. And now, as I wrap up on this particular question, to compound the financial burden, the thinking is that we invest in children. Right? I come from a family of 7. whose responsibility the children it then becomes to provide for life after death. Now, it is an enormous expense and burden on the siblings of the family to provide for the funeral and for the life hereafter or thereafter. Now, in many cases, family members, and my daughter just told me the other day of colleagues of hers, have to go into debt to provide for funeral expenses and then to look after those who are alive. They've got to go into debt, take loans. Now, interestingly, our millennials today, I lose track of what they call the generation X, Y, Z, Z, I don't know what they are, but the millennials, right? Earning well in the cities have to provide for the family back home. What's it called? Black tax, which places further financial burden on them. And I'm of the opinion that even our millennials today struggle with planning for their finances beyond this lifetime. And so unique in ways that are different. And so we have this compounded problem, culture, religious, and socio-economic. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that does kind of paint the landscape for us in a brilliant way. And you may be speaking for South Africa, but I can be certain that I could resonate with the same across the Limpopo. So I think those trends certainly transcend borders and boundaries. So no, I appreciate that. But maybe on to Elder Hanno. What does success look like? If someone, we've recognized what drives the problems, but what would you say if we were to say this person has successfully executed, generational wealth transfer? What does that look like?
Thank you, Elder Nda. Thank you for that, Howie. You really lay the foundation. When you spoke about the cultural differences, Pastor Howie, what I came across is that certain cultures, when confronted with the need of drafting a will, I don't know why this is, but it's more often the wife that says, please, let's have a will. And the universal comeback from the husband, she's going to kill me. Beloved, she's going to kill you, not because you have a will, but because you are stubborn. That is the reason why you kill husbands. Another interesting phenomenon I've come across is that when you say that people of wealth or of means have wills, it is actually a false assumption. And what I've learned is that a person of means often feels invincible. He is not going to die. How often have I not come across wealthy, especially males, and I say, please, let's do a will. He says, but I won't die. And the person firmly believes that. It's incomprehensible. And as executor, who eventually gets appointed, it's an absolute nightmare to sort out those entanglements. Ellen White was such an amazing person. And I think tongue in cheek, she said, you will not die one day sooner when you have a will. Relax. Just plan for the future. Another thing I think, Howie, that you alerted us to was that people, and especially Adventists, are adverse in planning their future. This week again, I learned of somebody who said, I'm not saving for a pension plan because Jesus will come before then. I'm not having life insurance. Jesus will come. Now, this is actually at the heart of the issue at stake. You are going to die with a will plan. Either you're going to draft it or the government is going to draft it on your behalf. Developed from the Roman times, it was understood that when a person passes away, his assets don't just disappear. Something must happen to it. And the law of interstate succession in most countries are actually very fair because it is based on consanguinity, blood relatedness. So firstly, although your wife is not your blood, your wife will be cared for, then your children, grandchildren, then parents, then siblings. That's a very fair plan in general. However, it leaves out the concept of God in our planning, because government will not plan for God and welfare and outreach on our behalf. The second element is that by omitting to have a will, it shows a lack of planning and stewardship. If the government, and I refer to this very loosely, when government has a plan of distribution on your behalf, it will not contain an executor. An executor is the person who steps into the shoes of the deceased and who has then to faithfully wrap up the affairs of the deceased. Without a will, that appointment is not of your own choosing. And secondly, interstate succession is based on blood relations. You will not be able to give to the church or to any worthy cause if you die without a will. Now, this next thing is to have a will, but an ungodly will, where the cause of God is not remembered. We know that all the flock, all the animals on 1,000 hills belong to God. Yet we fail to return to him that which is his. So what would be an alternative to not having a will, or to have an earthly will, a worldly will, is to have a Christian will, a Christ-inspired will. We have enough texts in the Bible to guide us. There's also spirit of prophecy. There's also general counsel on what to do in our estate planning. Ellen White said, you must have a will that will stand the test of time. That is critical. And it just feeds into rational planning of your affairs. What is the definition of a good will? It is not a will that will stand up in a court of law as a valid will. A successful, well-drafted will is the will that will never have to go to court to be tested. And that is what we are aiming for in planned giving and trust services. That we do, brother, promise better than the world. That our quality, our standard, our professionalism is of such an integrity that our documents will never ever have to go to court to be tested. So in essence, intergenerational wealth transfer that is done properly will be done through the provision of a Christ-inspired will, remembering your loved ones as well as God's promise.
Okay, I think that's a solid answer, because it ticks, the boxes of our Christian context. It ticks the box of moving from one generation to another, and I think it also ticks. It accounts for what you accumulate in the present life. But what's becoming very clear, though, is we seem to be zoning in on this. The will becomes, it's almost like that's the bridge between one generation to another. I think the minute we're talking about a transfer, it's to move it from one point to another, and the will keeps coming up as that point of transfer. So maybe let me go to Elder Promise Ngube to maybe assist us technically. What does a valid will look like? I mean, what are the elements of a will that makes it stand the test of time? I mean, just from what Elder Hannah was talking about.
Okay. Thank you, my elder. I just want to go back a little bit and just go back to what Pastor Howie alluded to. You know, the fact that if you talk about someone making a will, they tend to shrink because they think that you know, when they make a will, they are precipitating their death, as it were. So they tend to say, no, I don't have to make a will, as if they will add one more minute to their lives by delaying in making a will. But that's not true. What I'll do, Elder, is just ask a few questions, give short and brief answers, so that at the end of the day, our audience will know what a will looks like, what they can include in a will, what a valid will looks like. So what is a will? You know, the short answer is it's sometimes called the testament. It is a document where you state, it's a written document where you state what should happen to your property when you die. In simple terms, it's a written document signed before two witnesses where you simply tell the world what should happen to your property when you die. So who can make a will? Anyone who's of sound mind can make a will. Just underline sound mind there. In what language can you make a will? Any language, any human language, English, Swahili, Afrikaans, Shona, Ndebele, whatever human language it is. In Zimbabwe, you can do that. You can make a will in any language. And what are the requirements of a valid will? That was one of your specific questions. That will must be in writing. That's in terms of the Zimbabwean law. It must be signed by the person making the will, and it must be signed and witnessed by two witnesses. It must be dated, and both the witnesses and the person making the will must be of sound mind. You hear me repeating that very often. And if you are very ill, some people decide to make wills when they are critically ill. There is a procedure that must be followed when you are at that stage in order to ascertain whether you were of sound mind when you made that particular will. And then what can be willed? You can will any property, property that you can touch, property that you cannot touch, like shares, trusts, and so on, that can be in a will. You can will the custody of your children. You can will guardianship, and you can also determine who can have access you can name the executor, the custodian of your property when you die. And one of the things that people always ask is what are the advantages of a will? You know, Elder Hano, you mentioned one of them. You can choose an executor, the person who will have custody of your assets when you are dead, and you then distribute it according to your wishes. So that's the first advantage. The second advantage is in a will, you can clearly state who your beneficiaries are going to be. You know, and one thing that people should always understand is that a will be followed. Whatever is stated in the will will be followed. The law makes it mandatory to follow what is stated in the will unless it is illegal or immoral. So if you say my property should go to so and so, that will happen after you die. The third advantage is that wills avoid disputes. We've seen a lot of squabbles when someone dies. You avoid all that by clearly stating where your property should go. And the other advantage is you can ensure that the cause of God is not forgotten, because you can make a provision for the cause of God in your will, and you can also make a provision for the needy in your will. Elder Hano, you talked about the Christian will. Yeah, that's something that that we do at PGTS as well. because in essence, a Christian will is one that takes care of the family and also takes care of the cause of God. So in essence, I think that's what Elder Nda I would describe as what a will would look like and what its advantages are if one makes a will. Thank you.
No, I think that is helpful. I think that is very helpful in terms of in the context of what we're discussing. Maybe just a quick one here. I'm seeing. Okay, first of all, this is Honorable Florence Ziambi, one of your. She's of your profession.
Oh, okay. Yes.
So I think that one is a greeting. But then there's a question here. Cindy So asking, can a will be contested at court of law? And maybe do you want to just quickly respond to that before I jump over to Pastor Howard?
Yes, it can. Elder Hano actually said we should draft wills so professionally that they should never be tested in a court of law. The law actually sets out the requirements. There's the Wills Act, which sets out the requirements of a valid will. So we actually would encourage our listeners to go to a lawyer in the drafting of a will, especially a Christian lawyer. And what is required by the law will then be adhered to in the drafting of a will. There are certain things that you can contest. For example, you can contest the fact that one of the children has been given more property than the other. That can never be contested. Usually the valid grounds of contesting a will is whether the person who made the will was of sound and disposing mind when they actually drafted that will. The other reason that people usually contest wills is on the signature, where they say this is not the signature of my late father. Those are some of the things that they contest, but usually the contents themselves are generally not an issue. But if you go to a lawyer and they follow the requirements stipulated in the law, then even if somebody wants to contest, they won't have any grounds to contest.
Yes. No. Thanks for that. No.
Yes. Could I just add as the side, just to add what Elder Promise has said there. I want to say, if you are going to draw up a will, go to your trust services director at your conference. Have that department draw up your will for you. And Hanu, you can correct me if I'm not quite spot on here now. If you do that, the conference then, the trust service becomes executor, and those fees that are legally has to go to him from your estate will then go to the conference. So already just by going to your conference director, you are what's the word now? Bequeathing money to the conference, which would go to the lawyer or to the bank when they become your executor. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I'd put Yvonne's contacts on the screen for those who may need that service. And maybe just to clear the air on that as well, Elder Promise actually verifies every single will that Yvonne looks at, because she's an intern, so he also supervises her. So those who may be concerned, you have someone senior. It goes through various layers, but she is well qualified herself. Maybe to jump over to you, Pastor Howie. You wanted to
just to clarify something on the executorship. You can approach us to draw your will. We will not force you to make us the executor of your will, to make the conference the executor of your will. It's still a choice, but we encourage you. To make the conference the executor of the will. One thing that our viewers should understand is any executor of a will is entitled to 5% of the value of the estate. So anyone who administers your estate is entitled to that in terms of the Zimbabwean law. So why not make the church the executor? By that, you are actually giving something to the cause of God rather than giving it to someone else. So your point is taken, Pastor Howard.
Fantastic. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. I was talking about the multicultural demographic of your district, Pastor Howie. Have you seen any unique ways that we can learn from approaches to generational wealth transfer? I mean, we've also heard what success looks like, but I mean, from a cultural perspective, have you come across different novel ways that we could learn from?
Thank you. Just a almost immediate response to unique ways. My default answer is no. I have not. I have not. And I probably can explain a little later. Now, Hanu's comment on of rich people also not wanting to draw up a will is interesting. And yeah, it just again shows that folk, there's something about the will and death that folk across the wealth spectrum have a challenge with. But then stating it as it is, right? Stating it as it is in our country. And when I say our country, I can speak for the countries just across our borders. The majority, this major disparity between the haves and the have-nots. Now, we all know the saying, we must see how the other half live. Now, in my instance, I'm implying the poor and the marginalized see how the other half lives. Now, when I was placed in the Midrand district, I went to Tembisa, which is a massive township in the east, just between Pretoria and Johannesburg in the Midrand district. And there I came up from how the other half lived. And I came home and I said, you know what? It's not the other half. It's the other 80% plus of the population who live on the other side of the tracks. Now, the majority of our population in this country, and I can probably speak for countries across our borders as well, for the majority of them, there is no unique way. There is no unique way. Any way is almost nigh impossible. You see, and you can't transfer any wealth to the next generation when there is no wealth to start with, and there never was. So you have this conundrum as to what now. Just to give you a practical example, I come from a middle, working class, Cape colored family. Must be very specific because our previous government, they classified the folk who look like me into six different classifications, right? And they started with us in the Cape, so we go on top. And we automatically think that because you are top, we the super duper colors, you know what I mean? Better than the other colors. But that having been said, I come from a middle class working class. My father had no formal education, and he worked 2 menial jobs most of his life to put food on the table. My mom, as we say, was a domestic engineer all her married life. Excellent cook, excellent mother. Now, she died at age 70. My father and her were the same age. She was the 7th of January, and he was the 16th of January. My father, he died at 96. 96, man. He kept on saying he's better than our then cricket captain, Graham Smith. He's 95 and not out. Graham could never get to anywhere past 20 or 30, and then he was out. Now, his little bit of pension from his last employer ran out long time ago already. We as siblings had to chip in to cover his day-to-day expenses. And guess what? When he died at age 96, we, his children, had to chip in to bury him. Now, I nor my older 6 siblings, we did not receive a blue penny from his generational wealth transfer. Not Elder Promise, not even a Zim dollar. Tololo, Tololo, Dada, nothing. And this, unfortunately, is the reality that we sit with. Now, this is the reality for the majority in our country and across our borders. There will be no unique ways to implement generational wealth transfer because we don't have the wealth to start off with. Thank you.
Sorry, I was on mute there. That's an interesting take. Elder Hanno, do you want to speak to that? Actually, maybe just before you come on, let me just put this on the screen. It's a long comment question. Thanks for a very interesting subject. The system was designed like that. Blacks were not exposed to having life policies. In the Black culture, having livestock is what has always been our investment. Unless some disease wipes away the stock, that was and is still our will. Disadvantage is some relatives take everything from the family because nothing is written down if the father passes away. Is there law that protects such families? Please focus on people who are not in the same league. Sorry, it was cut off there on our little system. But maybe, does anyone want to speak to that? Okay, maybe Elder Hanno and then Elder Promise.
The lady touches a nerve. In that, we are all unique, and law tries to provide for everybody. And in the process, some people are disenfranchised. I think the dichotomy here is highlighted between rural communities and city folk. People in Sandton and big metropolitan areas, as a general rule, don't own cows. You know, it's a different community. And it's very difficult because I've come across this exact situation, in Midrand no less, where the wife and the children of the deceased, they've all contributed to the household. And they've all created the wealth that is in the estate of the deceased. But then the eldest brother, his sibling, comes in and he says, according to our tradition, I must get it all. And very often the wife is then destitute. She's an outcast. She's not welcome in the family. So that is actually a very real issue that we have. And for me, the solution to this is education, education, education. You cannot overcome these thoughts, the mindset, if we don't educate. And I just want to emphasize the Western way of estate planning is by no means right or perfect. It is just trying to address the needs of a specific society. And it does not bring joy to everybody. Pastor Nda, I don't know, Brother Nda, I don't know if you want me to speak on the Christian will, or we should further discuss this.
I think the Christian will was slightly covered. I think maybe to jump onto, while still on this question, maybe the legal element. Elder Promise, did you want to add to that? I think
yes. Certainly, Elder Masuba. I think the question.
Maybe in your answer, if you can also add in your answer, if you can just also cover a quick answer to that. Just a quick answer to that question. It says, if there's a will, is the state still subject to taxation during the transfer process?
Okay. Yes. the question was, is there a law that protects people in the rural areas from being disenfranchised by relatives and so on? The simple answer, yes, there is a law. It's in Zimbabwe, it's in the Administration of Estates Act. It specifically says that when someone dies, no one is allowed to come and grab anything from the estate, whether there is a will or not. No one is allowed to come and grab anything that belongs to the deceased. The estate of the deceased is given, or the custody of the estate of the deceased is given to the one who was immediately staying with the deceased or had custody of that property anyway, until an executor of the estate has been appointed. And if anyone comes and takes away the property from the estate, then then that person can be charged with a criminal offense. So there is a law that protects people from taking away property from estates, and it's just that people are not aware of it. And then, is there duty? Yes, there is estate duty. When the property is being transferred from the deceased to the beneficiary, whether there is a will or not, there is estate duty.
Okay, no, that's helpful. Excuse me. Maybe if you can speak to Christian Will's Elder Hannah, and in the context of what Pastor Howie was talking about as well, if anyone wants to add to the idea of, because we're also looking at building wealth in the current life, because I believe there's always something to transfer, but maybe how we structure our affairs is what ends up leaving us with nothing to transfer. Do you want to speak to that? The idea of a Christian will and maybe having nothing to transfer.
Yeah.
It is a reality that some people really have nothing to transfer. And I think that the topic of a will is not a cure-all for every situation. Ultimately, if there are no assets, what will be the substance of the generational wealth transfer? It's just not there. But if we look at a Christian will, I think Proverbs 5 verse 9 says, honor God with all you have. And this goes further than tithe. It's often used as a reason to pay tithe, because you give him the first of your yield. However, it really refers to everything you have. Now, in a Christian will, I've come across people of very pure mind who say that if a child or a surviving spouse is not a Seventh-day Adventist, they will not inherit in terms of this, my Christian will. And I cringe, because that's not the plan of salvation. You have to care for your own. The advice in 1 Timothy 5 verse 8, he who does not care for his own is worse than an infidel. Infidel. And it is better for him never to have received the faith. So why on earth will you disinherit people who you assume are not worthy? However, logic prevails and common sense. And if you have a child who has a drinking problem or an addiction problem or gambling problem or just doesn't know how to work with money, there are ways and means of also caring for that child, often by way of a trust in favor of that child, rather than just leaving that child out of the will. I would like to share with you an excerpt from Ellen White, how he counsels on stewardship, page 323 and 324. And beloved, these are hard words, but these words need to be heard. Many manifest a needless delicacy on this point. They feel that they are stepping on forbidden ground when they introduce the subject of property in order to learn what disposition they design to make. But this duty is as sacred as the duty to preach the word to save souls. And that is the element, the driving force behind the Christian will. As trust services, planned giving, trust services, it is our sacred duty, as sacred as preaching the world, to alert the members that God should come first in the drafting of their will. I've done a number of wills where the person, the testator says, I leave everything to the surviving spouse. If there's no surviving spouse, I leave it to my children, then my grandchildren. If there's none of them, to my parents. If they predeceased, to my siblings. If there aren't any surviving siblings, I leave it to the church for evangelism. Is that a Christian will? I'm afraid it is not. It's just the will of somebody who has run out of options of people whom to give to. A Christian will is not a will of the last instance. It is a will that contains the wishes of the stewardship in the first instance, without leaving out the immediate family and to care for them. The question that somebody asked about protection when there's a will or where there isn't a will, in South Africa, you cannot disinherit a surviving spouse. So the purest of mind who says, I leave everything to the church, but does not provide for the spouse, the law on the provision for maintenance for surviving spouses will sort you out. The surviving spouse should, in the first instance, inherit. We as a church can only provide advice if we know the Bible, if we know the spirit of prophecy, and we are acquainted with the wisdom of the General Council on this topic. It is difficult for a conference or a union to appoint a trust services director with the qualifications, because it's a budget, an expense from month one, and it can take years for the return to be seen. However, it is a worthy investment for any church organization, because it is not trust services, and planned giving will never be a profit center to the church, if I can use business language. Just as we don't expect personal evangelism or youth to make money, we should recognize that planned giving and trust services is a ministry and not an income generating resource for the church. More than $1 billion have been inned by the planned giving and trust services of the General Conference. And it's probably close to $2 or $3 billion. But the element, the basic foundation is always worship, ministry. We should introduce our people to the benefit of living as stewards. The benefit, Howie, you've taught us so many times, stewardship is not only about money. It is about time. It is about thoughts. It's about kindness. There are 5 elements. Oh, Howie is trying to stop me. I'm not sure, Howie.
No, five, 6
elements. I got you, Howie. So this is a sacred duty upon the planned giving and trust services department to share the opportunity of ministry, not through our own assets, but through God's assets.
Thank you so much. Would you believe we have run out of time, but I need to give Elder Promise a slot and parting words to Pastor Howie. Someone has actually put in a question that I think we had spoken about earlier, Elder Promise, about trust. If you can just speak to, as per our discussion, the advantages of trusts and when they can be used and so on. And also, if you can speak to, some people are concerned about everything I've worked for when I die, will go to my wife, who will marry someone else. And in the end, everything I've worked for will end up maybe, and then that man then bequeaths it to someone else who was never my kith and kin. Can you also speak to that? Because these are the real concerns that people have. And if we can just ask for an extra 5 minutes from people, just to wind this topic up. And those who have to go, it will be available on our Facebook page and YouTube if you need to catch up later. And then I'll come to Pastor Howie to close this off when we're done.
Okay. Thank you, Elder Masuku. You've asked questions that require more than 5 minutes, but I'll try as much as possible to compress my answers. What is a trust? A trust is established when a person, whom we usually call a settlor, transfers his property to another person, whom we call a trustee, for the benefit of a third person, whom we call a beneficiary. So you can create a trust through a will. You can create a trust in a deed of trust, like a Promised Nube family deed of trust. You can do that. And I'll just run through some of the key provisions that you find in a trust deed. For example, you find the name of the trust. You find a clause that says that the trust is a body corporate, which means that it is capable of being sued or suing in its own name. So it's a separate entity from the individual who creates it. It will have the objects of the trust, the powers of the trustees, what they can do, what they cannot do. It will have the beneficiaries of that trust. And it will also have a criteria. It will have the trustees, but also a criteria of how the trustees are appointed. And that is very key in managing the generational wealth transfer. So what are the advantages of a trust? It can survive generations. Here we're talking about a generational wealth transfer. A trust can have perpetual existence. For example, to speak about the trust that I'm already involved in, the Rhodes, Cecil John Rhodes created a trust in his will, and I'm in the Rhodes Scholarship Board Trust. And Rhodes died on the 26th of March, 1902, but we still have a board that is distributing his wealth, educating brilliant children, because in creating that trust, he said we should select brilliant children and educate them at a certain level, and there is a criteria. But it died in 1902. So that was part of his generational wealth transfer. So it can go on for a long time. You save on estate duty. That's another advantage of a trust. When you die, because you have already transferred the property to the trust. There are no statutory returns in a trust, and you can choose the trustees that you want, and you stipulate the criteria how they will be appointed, and then also you set out the parameters of distributing the wealth even when you are gone. And in most trusts, you are distributing the income. So you will name the beneficiaries and you state how the income is going to be distributed to the beneficiaries. Elder Hano talked about the delinquent children, and you are saying that there are ways of taking care of them rather than giving them direct property. And the trust is one of those ways where you are giving them income for specific things, which they can't then misuse or abuse. because they've stipulated in the trust document. And you also ensure that there are no squabbles when you die, because you've got a separate trust. The disadvantage, I'll just mention two of them, Elder Masuku. The first one is that once you have created a trust and transferred property to a trust, remember, the trust is a separate entity from you. It means you have lost control of that property. It is now under the control of the trustees. So it becomes a disadvantage because you are no longer in control. Though we minimize that by making the settlor a fellow trustee. So you can actually mitigate that loss of control. The other disadvantage is that your beneficiaries also lose control of that property. It's under the control of the trustees. But I actually think the advantages outweigh the disadvantages, because you can specifically set a criteria of those who are going to be your trustees, and they can take care of all your interests when you are gone. And then quickly, Elder, you asked about those that are worried about couples that are worried that their property may be misused. For me, that those worries can be addressed by one thing: estate planning. Estate planning. Using all these instruments that we are talking about, they can draw up a will. They can even draw up a joint will with their own spouse. They can set up a trust. They can have outright gifts during their lifetime, and that ensures that their properties not abused. There is one clause. It's a clause that when you are in church, Elder Hano, you sort of shy away from it. But it's allowed to put a certain clause in a will. You can actually put a clause in your will allowing your surviving spouse to use all the property that you have. And the clause would then say, until he or she dies or remarries, whichever comes sooner. Yeah, and then if they die or remarry, the property goes to your ultimate beneficiary. So if you are worried about the next wife using your property, no, it won't happen. They've covered your back in the will. So there are ways, and there are ways of protecting people if they approach estate planners.
Yes, I'm seeing a lot of light bulbs go on about people's heads after that last statement. And maybe just before I move on you, can you also just quickly address this one? I think it's a quick one.
Yeah. Okay. Intellectual property, non-physical. If there is a will, it's easy because these are covered by a will. The words that we use in law would say you can will corporeal and incorporeal property, meaning tangible and intangible assets. So you can will a car, which is a tangible asset, and you can will intellectual property, which is an intangible asset. Unit trusts and so on, they all can fall under a will or even in a trust. If there is no will, it's the laws of intestate succession that come in, because they are property. They will be dealt with like any other property, but under the laws of intestate succession.
Great, thank you so much.
I don't know whether
that one was well answered, and maybe this one on where there's a single parent and there was no will, what happens now in that situation?
So let's see, how do you, as the remaining children, go about it? Okay. It's a single parent, there is no will, but they are children. There are laws of intestate succession which cover that. And what will happen in that instance if they are children? Each child is going to get a child's share of the value of the remaining property, or of the property left by the deceased. What I mean by that, if there are 5 children, the child's share will be 1/5 of the value of the estate. If there is no will. So there are laws that deal with that.
I think that is helpful. The questions are coming in thick and fast. We can't take them all at the moment. We'll try to respond to some of them in the comments later on. But of course, someone is asking for the whole idea of trust to be unpacked on its own. And by the way, I think let's also appreciate our discussants today. These are people who, on a good day, should really be charging for some of the information that we're getting. So we really appreciate that. And another comment, thank you for such an interest. We all need wills and put God first in passing our generational wealth. And then goes on to say, can we pass our life insurance payouts to the church for mission? The short answer is yes. We can have a discussion around that. And then should I have a will, since whatever I have is the product of what we worked together for with my wife? I think that was addressed earlier. Yes, you can have a joint will. But yeah, certainly we can have that discussion. So maybe just to cap it off, Pastor Howie, as a family man, as a pastor, you did allude to the fact that some of these discussions are difficult for us to have. Can you just, in your parting, as a parting shot, give us ways to bring this discussion to the table, to address this issue? And then after that, Elder Hanno, if you can just give us some parting words, and we can close our discussion.
Thank you. Now, during my term as stewardship director, I would normally refer estate planning, that's finances for beyond your lifetime, to Hanno, who was the director at the time. So, you know, that I'll just hand over to him to sort out. However, from a stewardship point of view, and it's part and parcel of trust and generational wealth transfer, I stress to all the churches I visited, after you have returned your tithe and allocated to God and allocated your percentage-based offering, after you've done that, pay yourself. Pay yourself. And I coined this phrase, which means save. I coined this phrase as seen on a billboard on the N1 highway between Joburg and Pretoria. And this is it. Save as extravagantly as you spend. I repeat for emphasis, save as extravagantly as you spend. Church members, folk in the community, we need to get into the habit of saving. In South Africa, 71+% of our net income is used to service our debt. Saving is low on our scale. We're not a saving nation. Save, get into the habit, even if it's a small amount on a regular basis. It's amazing how it accumulates over time. Now, get rid of debt. The only good thing about debt is this. The only good thing about debt is this. G, get. O, out. Another O, of. D, debt. Get out of debt. That's the only good thing about debt. Cut up all your clothing store cards. Cut them up. Burn your 5 to 6 credit cards. And folks, don't look at me like that. Don't look at me. I know you look at me. You know you have at least 3 credit cards each. 3. They each to come by. You maximum, then the problem begins. And as church members, we need to know and apply the stewardship of frugality. Stewardship of frugality. And it's summed up in this. Live within your means. Full stop. Live within your means. Cut your suit according to the cloth. Some of us get a small piece of cloth. Others get a big piece of cloth. It's not the size that matters. It's how you cut your suit. There's so much more that I can share in Daba, but thank you for inviting me. Time doesn't allow. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Spoken like a true stewardship director. Once a stewardship director, always a stewardship
Always
director.
a stewardship director.
And I think I wanted to bring, I really appreciate you saying that, because some may think we've only spoken about what happens when you die, but you're doing that connection to say when you live right, when you're living, it only makes sense to then make sure that after you're gone, I think the example that Elder Promise was giving about roads, where a century on, your money can still be working for you within your principles. I mean, Rhodes wasn't necessarily, we
Best
may not
advice.
necessarily have the same principles, but he had an intention for what his wealth was meant to do even after he was gone. So thank you so much for that. And then Elder Hannah, just some parting words?
Thank you, brother. And I think the most critical element of estate planning is prayer. You should prayerfully consider what you will do with your assets, what you will leave your assets to whom. The second element that I think is incredibly important is that we turn to professionals when we draft wills. A well-meaning elder in the church who is not versed in the art of drafting is dangerous.
Mm.
Turn to a professional. I don't mean go to any attorney. Go to an attorney that deals with wills and estates daily. That is the type of professional who will keep your will out of court. Intentions is just not good enough in estate planning. Remember that your will is a dynamic document. The will drafted when you were 20 and you still loved your mother dearly and she was the only woman in your life might not serve you in your 40s and 50s when you have a spouse and children. So please keep up to date with your wills. Some elements triggering the re-looking of a will is the birth of new children, considerable asset changes in your life, divorce, as uninvited as it is, divorce will definitely trigger the changing of your will. It might be that some of your beneficiaries have since died. Keep your will current. There is nothing as dangerous as an old will. And our time is limited. I'd like to speak on the effect of divorce on bequeathing assets. It is critical. And the last thing I think is engage your pastor, not on technical issues, but on counsel. And prayer, Bible study, the Word of God, the Spirit of prophecy, let those principles guide you. You cannot go wrong when you do estate planning and you take that into consideration. Thank you for the platform. Thank you for the excellent work the panelists are doing in their daily lives. It's been a privilege. And I think there might be a need for some more of these discussions in future.
Absolutely. And allow me to appreciate all of you for your candid contributions, for your time. I know you should be with your families or with your congregations and so on. Thank you so much, and God bless you richly. Elder Ncube, you are the chairperson of what we do. Anything you want to quickly say as we part, as I put on the screen the contacts for our paralegal intern? Please go ahead.
Thank you, my elder. I think this has been an informative discussion. I would like to thank my fellow panelists for the contributions and the information that they've given us, and also you for planning this session. I think it's important for our church members to know about this Plan Giving and Trust Services Department. The address has been flighted. and you can contact Yvonne. But always one thing that Elder Masuku mentioned, whatever Yvonne does will be ultimately vetted by me. So you can be assured that you get the best professional advice at the end of the day. I don't know whether I can abuse my time, Elder. There's one thing that I just wanted to challenge. I just wanted to challenge everyone. I think Pastor Howard did talk about nothing to transfer. I just want to encourage young people to be stewards of their talent. God has given us various talents. Let us use them wisely and let us use them effectively, so that at the end of the day, there is some wealth that we are able to transfer. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is Ecclesiastes 9 verse 10, which says that whatever your hand findeth to do, do it with all your might, for there is no wisdom nor knowledge in the grave where you are going. So it's talking about death. There is nothing, there is no wisdom, no knowledge where you are going, but while you are still alive, use those talents wisely. And I've always found it interesting that in the 10 Commandments, when God is talking about the Sabbath, he actually says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, and then you must rest and so on. But he says no one should work. No, he says, know your servant, know your cattle, know your beast, who is within your crop. Which means that in the mind of God, we should have all those things. God's intention is that we should be the head and not the tail. So let us use our talents wisely and be able to leave some wealth for future generations and plan for how that wealth will be utilized after we are gone. Thank you, my elder.
Well spoken. Thank you so much. Let me ask our facilitators not to move. I'll get back to you shortly, but maybe just to speak to our viewers, to appreciate all the great comments, and to let you know that we will be back next month with a special feature. You don't want to miss it. We'll be communicating in due course, and may God richly bless you and keep you safe and help you to facilitate and utilize some of the principles that have been shared this afternoon. And with that, take care and have a good day.